Are you tired of making the same mistakes in ITF Taekwondo sparring? Want to take your skills to the next level so sparring is more enjoyable? Then this video is for you.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 128 of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. So this week we are going to look at 5 of the most common mistakes that you might be making in your ITF sparring. And if you find yourself making those same mistakes again and again, this is definitely a video for you. They're common, they're predictable, they're repeatable, they're things that we would definitely love to help you eradicate from your sparring. So definitely this is the video for you if you know your sparring is one of the areas in your training that you would like to improve on. So Richie, what are we going to talk about? What are our big 5?
Yeah, so first we're going to start with poor decisions. So some of the decisions that people make that are common mistakes that lead to bad actions and potentially giving away scores, and also on the flip side, eventually you losing the match. Then we're going to look at the setup, so how your stance is in terms of your setup and how important that is. That is extremely important. We often see common mistakes there. And we're also going to look at ways people telegraph their intentions without even knowing. This is a real common mistake which leads to bad results. And also the mindset. Some people have the incorrect mindset towards sparring. So a common mistake there for sure. And we'll go through some ideas of how to reframe that. And then lastly, we'll look at the understanding of space and ring positioning and how important it is and how you can improve it to make sure you don't make those mistakes.
Perfect. So let's jump in right away and look at that concept of decision making. And when it comes to sparring and in competition in particular, we're talking about decision making under some pressure. This first little clip looks at one of the more common things that people do, and we're talking about range or distance.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the most important thing here is you don't want to make poor decisions in terms of using the incorrect action, whether it's a technique or a movement, at like the wrong time. So here we see the girl in the red helmet, obviously a blue belt, just learning the skills of sparring, but you see that she's kicking really from the wrong distance. So she's lifting her leg a little bit too far away, and that is probably the incorrect decision and a bit of a mistake here, which gets her in trouble by the girl who's that little bit more experienced by the looks of it here in blue with the red belt.
Yeah, sometimes these errors can seem very small, and something as simple as a kick to the back. So we know that the Katrina Carr in red from Scotland has a particular facing right from the beginning. So when you see Izzy Bright, who's a great competitor herself, coming forward there, we're expecting to see the turning kick come off the left, but a little bit of a decision error as it happens, and often that will lead to a warning. Here we can see as well the decision to step in, to close the distance, and Izzy is working from a longer range, so it's difficult for her. She does have to shorten the range to get push in against Katrina. That stepping decision causes a problem, and all of a sudden Katrina is able to be the person with the leg over the top and at the appropriate range. So sometimes the decisions we're talking about are really quite small errors.
Yeah, so to conclude with this, basically what we're going to be talking about here is try make the correct action for what you're intending to do. So the decision there really is, are you making the correct decision in terms of the action you need for the correct outcome? So are you looking to kick the opponent? You need to be in correct distance. Are you looking to punch in the opponent? You need to close the distance, etc. So they're just 2 very simple examples. But of course, the higher level you go with black belts, etc., you see these higher level ones that we're looking at as well in terms of important decision making.
So sometimes as well, it's fair to say that you can make the right decision. So Julio on the edge of the ring here in red has been pulling and, look for the blitz, and the same for his opponent for Belarus. The decision could be potentially the right decision, but it leads to the wrong outcome. And we also have to be able to recognize when we look back in it, do I change that? No, we've shortened the distance. We've made a go for it. Julio was on the corner. That was the right decision to try maybe to push him out. But maybe there's something to be improved in the execution. Maybe the read of it wasn't quite perfect, but it can be the right decision that leads to the wrong outcome. That's not a bad decision. That's, as you said, a good decision that just didn't pay off.
Yeah, what I do love about that little clip in the corner of Julio is the fact he makes that side kick, tries not to exit, which it's inevitable really, but he covers up really well. So that's a good action straight away. And then he gets his own hand in, try to get in that little hand as well to get a bonus point for himself. So it's important that you're not kind of dwelling on these poor decisions, that you're trying to stay active and what's important now in the situation of the sparring context.
And you are flying on the segues today, by the way. And in terms of that particular one, we can trigger bad decisions sometimes when we forcing a person to respond. So in this case, Ivan Grishuk is behind in this match. He gets caught with a back leg front kick to the body as such, and a very, very clear score. And in that moment, he goes, okay, what do I do now? And he throws himself forward. And, you know, the positive side of this, it's not a negative response. He's going out, he's looking for the scores, but taking a half a second to think what's important now, he might set himself up with a better range. And Seba is able to maintain a distance and a long range and keep his legs in play, and even then makes a really good decision to change angle and get out of the corner there. And we have, you know, consecutive scores leading to a loss of momentum. So, you know, thinking in terms of your decisions, really, really important, that analogy that you brought up there. What's important now or what's important next? Try to keep that front of mind as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So then next we're looking at your stance setup. So as you said, everything starts from the ground up, and the setup of your stance is crucial. So a common mistake is that poor setup, essentially, where you see here chasing and not having your feet set, and that allows you to be second fiddle to your opponent all the time. So we see here the girl with the red belt and the blue gear has that little bit more composure in her stance, which allows her to push and pull out of range when necessary, and to be in the right position when she needs to attack herself. So you don't want to be chasing. You want to have your feet set under you, always on balance. And ideally, you don't want to be stepping in ITF Taekwondo sparring. You want to have a stance set up where you're moving in and out, and you're moving both feet ideally, rather than stepping like you're walking after somebody down the street. That's not the ideal setup, because your feet are going to be following each other, and often they're so close, your balance isn't going to be underneath you correctly for you to be able to throw shots.
Which also leads us into the next thing of being predictable. So your shot setup should vary. It shouldn't always be at the same range, the same depth. There should be doubles, there should be change ups and shots, and even at a very high level we can make a small mistake, like by using the same kind of entry 2 or 3 times, which gives your opponent a little bit of a chance to have a read on you. And generally speaking, these are critiques that we can't level on these competitors that we're showing here. But you know, when the pressure is on, and like in this case, you're sparring up height, sometimes these little cracks can show, and these are the things that will actually lead to the difference over the course of a sparring match. But we can see 3 times where the short step and the double with the front leg side kick came, and it just meant that it gave Katrina a little bit of time to read it, perhaps, as we come in. And then the third one, little setup, but it's the same thing again, and gave her a chance to get the range and pick a counter. We all work very, very well that way in terms of recognizing things once we've seen it a couple of times. But if it keeps varying, we have to actually make a different kind of decision that's much more proactive. So we'd like to force our opponents into that kind of situation.
Yeah, definitely. What I do like here from Izzy is the fact she's in and out with the rhythm and also the front hand, and moves in different ways, which actually helps in her rhythm being a little bit different. So it is very important that you aren't really giving away your intentions of what you're trying to do. So the best thing you can do is disguise your intentions. Where do we see this on the lower level? The biggest thing we see is people stepping on their kicks. So they make a big step with their back leg so they can make a kick to close the distance. Your opponent will see the step and close you down pretty quickly. So if you're in the lower belts, not really in the black belt divisions as of yet, be aware of this stepping. If it's you that's doing the stepping, try to get rid of that habit as soon as possible. And if you notice it from your opponent or training partners, you should be looking to close down that space as soon as possible, as soon as they step foot to foot.
So finishing out this, not finishing out, but this next section will be mindset. So how you step into the ring and how you approach the environment of sparring can be really, really important, because it can be stressful, and stress leads to poor decisions and constrained actions, where we're seeing from Thomas and Blue here quite a relaxed and flowing style of sparring. So from that point of view, Richie, how would you summarize the mindset that we're looking to encourage people to show?
Yeah, what I see from here from Thomas is he's very much based on first principles: hit and don't get hit. So it's important that you don't approach it with a threat state and you're like fearing the whole idea of sparring. You're not going to enjoy it, and that's not going to be something that you want to do too often, and it's going to be hard for you to improve. So viewing it kind of like as a fight rather than a game is one way you can kind of switch this around. So look at the game side of sparring. If you see it as a fight, it's kind of a little bit more threatening for people, especially early on. And this can lead to poor performance and hesitation during your sparring as well, which can be detrimental to your progress. So instead, you're kind of looking for an approach that is fun and like a strategic challenge, almost like a game of chess with your kicks, punches, and movements. And that will help you to kind of get into a better mindset to approach the whole thing better. So it's all about being clever with your sparring. Hit, don't get hit. That's the aim of the game, and that will help you to be less fearful and to stay a little bit more focused and relaxed and to enjoy it more.
Our last topic is ring awareness, and this is where the unforced errors, as it were, if you take the tennis analogy, kind of come into play. And you've illustrated with the arrow here the direction that someone should be thinking to move. But in continuing that same line, there's an unforced error and an exit. And we have the same kind of thing here, taking the reverse turning kick or the back kick attempt at the edge of the ring, unforced error and an exit. And these add up to real scores on the board very, very, very quickly. And so we're always looking for people to recognize where they are in the ring, not just so you don't concede scores, but also to recognize where you're getting your highest value scores, because you will usually get the biggest return on the scoreboard when you're pushing out from the center and more judges can see what you're doing.
Yeah, so like this is whether you're training or whether you're looking at competition. Just being aware of your space is very important, because when your space is limited, so are your actions and your options. So like if you don't have much space behind you, you can't do exactly everything you want to do. But here in the ring, it's important. For this example, you see you should be circling when it's in a square ring, because if you keep moving back, you're not going to be in a good position to stay in the space that you need to be able to execute, especially if you're that more counter style with your approach. And that kind of ties into our last one of the mindset, that hit and don't get hit.
Yeah.
You need space. So it's important to be aware of it and be aware of your surroundings. Even in training, are there partners around you that are sparring with each other that you might bump into, etc.? So it's important to be on your feet, be active, ties back to our stance setup, and to be sure that you're not really holding your position too much or moving in the wrong way. In terms of sparring rings in competition, you never kind of want to be on the side like we've seen in that video. You want to be angling into the center all the time, and that's very, very important. You don't want to be kind of like on a straight line with your opponent. You want to ideally be towards the center and kind of cutting off that angle. So that's one of the mistakes we often see, especially from the lower level sparring practitioners, and especially when they don't practice in rings, because a lot of time in training halls, they're not designed to be in the perfect ring shape, so we're not really prepared for it until we go to competition.
Yeah, and I think that is the kind of the final take home out of that, of all of these things are errors that you can train to overcome, and you need to deliberately structure your training to overcome those errors. And maybe one of the easiest ones that you can start with is that ring awareness, by doing some of your sparring at least in a constrained space, in a ring, in a square, so you can recognize when you're moving towards the edges, when you're pushing from the center, and what it feels like to have that pressure of the edge on you, rather than just being able to hold up your hand and you take a few steps back towards the middle, which often happens in training. We don't want that.
Yeah, so hopefully these tips help you to avoid making these common mistakes, and that should allow you to be a bit more confident as well, and to enjoy your sparring more, which is very, very important. You're looking at the long-term goal here of enjoying and learning more about sparring, and then you can be able to express yourself that little bit better, not be so fearful, and actually enjoy the whole process, which is
for sure. Absolutely. So folks, that's us for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and again, if there's something that you really think we need to tackle, hit us up in the comments below or on any of the social media, and we will look into that topic for you for the next time. Other than that, see you next Friday.
See you in the next one.